Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Nathan Thompson with the Wellness Way, Yorkville. Happy Monday evening, guys. It is 6:30 Central Standard Time. I'm going a little bit early today, only because I'm going to go a little bit longer, and I need to make sure that I'm finishing up at about 7:30. So if you are watching right now on all of our platforms on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Facebook at Dr. Nathan Thompson, and also on Exemplify Health Center, the Wellness Way, Yorkville. Make sure, guys, that you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from as well. I'm going to talk about a really interesting topic about histamines. Is this the missing link with a lot of health issues that people are experiencing? I'm going to show you histamines from a different perspective that's different than what how allergists and immunologists look at histamine. So, guys, this is going to be really, really important because I really do think that a lot of the symptoms that people have is due to an immune response that is involving histamine. So, we're going to talk about the missing link and we're going to dive deep into this. And so, biggest thing I can tell you guys is enjoy it. Hopefully, you can get a lot of the information I'm going to go over. But if you don't, you can always go back and watch the replay. So if you are watching right now, make sure that you say hello. Let me know where you're watching from as well. And while we are waiting for people to jump on, just a couple of things, guys. I have people reach out all the time. How do I work with you guys? If you are from the Chicagoland area, coming up, this is in 2 days, Thursday, October 19th at 6 o'clock p.m. in Yorkville, Illinois. Come to the inflammation talk. This is the first step that really people need to understand in order to getting their life and their health back. Even what we're going to talk about really is an inflammatory response. Why? Because it involves the immune system. So all you have to do is just go to the top of the page and you will see the inflammation in-person event and you can register for it as well. So that's the in-person event at 6 o'clock on Thursday. But guys, if you are within the contiguous 48 states, just make sure that you do listen to contiguous 48 states. We just have a really hard time being able to order testing and getting people what they need outside the contiguous 48 states. But if you are within the contiguous 48 states, you want to work with me remotely, just go to the top of the page too, and you will be able to register for the inflammation webinar. You can watch that on demand, or you can watch it either on Tuesday evening or Saturday morning. Just register for it, and when you do, it'll give you reminders to make sure that you hop on during that time to watch the broadcast of the inflammation webinar. And then finally, guys, make sure that you are paying attention to this because I have, for those people watching, I have a treat for all of you. Coming up, this is a week from tomorrow, October 24th. Dr. Patrick is coming to Yorkville, Illinois for the I Disagree tour, guys. This is an event like no other. I guarantee you that when you come, this will be better than a Packers game, definitely better than a Bears game, definitely better than a pro sporting event. I can guarantee you that. Dr. Patrick this is an extension of his hormone the hormone seminar that he had put on for years and years and years. And he decided let's extend this to a lot of other things that we disagree with when it comes to healthcare and things like that. So yes, he will talk about mandates. Yes, he will talk about the immune system. They'll talk about hormones. He's going to talk a lot about it, guys. It will make so much sense. And so if you've gotten your tickets, thank you so much for getting your tickets. But if you haven't got your tickets yet, this is your motivation. This is your chance to get those tickets, because when you register, and all you have to do is go up to our link tree or go to the top of the page, and you will see the I Disagree event to register for that via Eventbrite. We are giving away right now 20 free tickets total. When they're gone, they are gone. And when you get your tickets, you have to put in the promo code LUCKYYOU. When you put in LUCKYYOU, you will get the tickets that you need. I don't know if there's a limit on tickets. It might be just one, maybe two. But get those tickets, because when 20 is used up, they are gone, and you will not be able to get those tickets for free. So this is just a thank you, guys, for watching this broadcast. Make sure you go there before the end of the broadcast and get those free tickets, especially if you are in the Chicagoland area, to see Dr. Patrick Flynn on his I Disagree tour. And it's going to be Tuesday, October 24th. Doors open at 5 o'clock. And it will run from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. I know people are like, oh, it's on a Tuesday. Guys, it's worth it. So make sure that you guys get registered for that. Get your free tickets if you are watching right now. So let's talk about histamine, guys. Is this the missing link to a lot of healthcare or a lot of health issues that people are having? I'll let you be the judge of that, but make sure that you watch this all the way through so that it makes sense. This is why, guys, I love a long format video so much, because doing things for 60 seconds or 90 seconds, it can be misconstrued. A lot of things are taken out of context. And in fact, a lot of the haters will take those reels that we make and will misconstrue them on purpose in order to try to get their point across. And that's why I always refer you back to the long format videos, because you can't take these things out of context. So let's talk about histamines and why this is so important, okay? Now let's go to the CDC. Go to the CDC, and here's what the CDC says, January 26, 2023. Here's what they say. More than a quarter of US adults and children have at least one allergy. We have a problem with our immune systems. Don't let anyone tell you that allergies are normal, that they're benign. You are not designed to have allergies, especially when it continues to get worse and worse. So here's what they say. Out of that 1.25 of US adults and children, 1 out of 3 adults and more than 1 in 4 US children have either a seasonal allergy and or eczema or a food allergy just in 2021. So when you look at the report, again, from the CDC, 1/4 of adults have a seasonal allergy, 7.3% have eczema, 6.2% have a food allergy. And the type of allergy they're talking about is an IgE food allergy, not the ones we're going to talk about that also involve histamines. And then when you look at children, nearly 1 in 5 children have a seasonal allergy. Over 10% have eczema, and 5.8% have a food allergy. So when you look at that, you are talking about here in the United States, close to 75 to 100 million people who have something going on when it comes to their immune system. And a lot of times people think, well, it's just the immune system overreacting to benign things. It's not. The immune system is the same as it was 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. But why does it continue to get worse? And I'm going to show you here in just a second. And in fact, out of those adults in the United States who have some form of allergy, 50% of them are they're taking antihistamines, whether that's Benadryl, Zyrtec, or Allegra. And even when you look at some of these antihistamines, they don't lower histamines. In fact, what they do is they block the receptor for histamine. So they're not lowering histamines, they're just blocking the receptor, which is kind of like just putting earmuffs over your ears so that you don't hear the smoke alarm. So by far and away, antihistamines are going to be the most popular, but you also look at decongestants like Sudafed and Afrin, which are involving some pretty powerful medications. Even some are taking allergy shots. Some are resorting to steroids in order to suppress the immune system response. And so when you look at that, you're looking at a whole lot of medications. And if allergies are continuing to get worse, you're looking at a great market for the pharmaceutical industry. Okay. Now, they aren't concerned about causes. What they're concerned about is they're concerned about treating effects. And in fact, I'll probably be going live with an interesting article that just came out from the University of Maryland Medical School. They've done research and they said, hey, the leading cause of autism is actually brain inflammation. And they're not saying anything about finding the cause of brain inflammation. They're talking about pharmaceuticals that they're going to discover and work on in order to pharmaceutically lower brain inflammation. I don't know. I'll just take a shot in the dark and let you know that maybe we should be looking at causes first and foremost. That's one of the biggest things. So what are some of the symptoms, guys? When we talk about histamines, what are some of the symptoms that you may have when you are having a histamine response? And I'm going to show you really what a histamine is, where it's released from, why it involves the immune system. So I want you to think of it. Here are some symptoms of a histamine response that's taking place inside the body. So rhinorrhea or runny nose, rhinitis or inflammation of the nasal passages, nasal congestion, sneezing, dyspnea. Then on top of that, that's just respiratory. And then from the nervous system perspective, you can have headaches. Yes, that includes migraine. You can also have dizziness. It can also be apparent in the gastrointestinal tract. Now, think of this. That can involve gas. That can involve bloating. That can involve feelings of extreme fullness after you eat, which is basically another name of saying bloating. You can have diarrhea, pain in the abdomen, constipation, nausea, emesis too. So, which is vomiting. Okay. In the circulatory system, tachycardia or rapid heartbeat, hypotonia, or actually they would call it like vascular collapse. In the skin, pruritus, which is inflammation of the skin. It can be itchiness, flushing of the skin, urticaria, eczema, and even swelling. So where are you having these responses taking place? Well, they're pretty systemic. They happen in the respiratory system, the gastrointestinal system, the skin. You can have a response in the circulatory system and even a response in the nervous system as well as it becomes systemic. So I want you to think of that, guys. How many people do you know right now, who have these issues? And if you would be so kind, if you would do me a favor, please make sure that right now you share this video or tag someone who needs to hear what I'm going to say next. Please do me a favor. I know I don't ask a lot from you guys, but in this case, I'm asking you, please make sure that you share this video or tag someone that you know who is suffering and you know that they will find great benefit from what I'm going to go over with you next, okay? So let's go over histamines and let's go over what the experts say about histamines. And one of the experts is either Cleveland Clinic or it's going to be the Mayo Clinic. Those are considered two of the best medical groups here in the United States. But what does the Cleveland Clinic say about the cells responsible for histamine release? And they're called mast cells. Here's what they say. Mast cells are a type of white blood cell located all over your body. People have the highest numbers of mast cells. Now listen to this, where the body meets the environment. So where the internal meets the external environment, which is going to be underneath the skin, around the lungs, and around the intestinal tract. And I've said this time and time again, where does your body want to fight the battle? It wants to fight the battle at the barrier. It doesn't want to wait until it becomes systemic. You fight the battle at the front lines. You fight the battle at the castle wall, which is why your barriers are so important, okay? In order to have a proper immune system response. Normally, what they say is the mast cells are part of your immune system. When mast cells detect a germ or a virus, they set off an inflammatory, otherwise known as an allergic response by releasing a chemical known as histamine. So histamines come from mast cells when they degranulate due to the presence of some kind of foreign invader. Mast cells are also involved with other vital functions in your body. They are part of wound healing, bone growth, and forming new blood vessels. So just so you guys know, is that histamines aren't entirely bad. They're not entirely bad. And in fact, they are in fact needed. But what is causing these cells to constantly degranulate to release histamine, and in which there is a massive histamine response that's taking place in so many people in the United States, 75 million to 100 million taking place. So just so you know, when you go back and look at these types of white blood cells, you have all kinds of different white blood cells, and they have these different functions within the body. So you have things like neutrophils, which are little eaters, mostly first responders to bacterial infections. They also have a secondary infection or secondary effect with a viral component that has been tagged by an antibody. But if you look at here, I circled this, the mast cell. Okay, so you have the mast cell, and what also will cause degranulation and histamine response is also the basophil as well. Now, you will also, with those histamines, it will attract another white blood cell that's known as an eosinophil. So an eosinophil. And that's why, guys, even if you pull out your basic blood work, your CBC with the differential, Well, what if you do, in fact, have an elevation of basophils or eosinophils, which I even saw today during a consult? Well, there's something that is producing some form of allergy response and or maybe even a parasite, because you will see an elevation of eosinophils because those are responsible one of the cells that are responsible for handling a parasite. So it's the mast cell that's really involved with what you would call a classic allergy. Now, mast cells are then what are release histamines. So now it goes to this. What on earth is a histamine? Here's what the Cleveland Clinic says. Histamine is a signaling chemical that your immune system releases to send messages between different cells. So when people talk all of this, histamines and interleukin 6 and interleukin this, and it's all of this, complex words, that they do in order to really sound smart and really confuse you. Basically, all these are chemicals released by the immune system to help the other cells talk to each other, or even to coordinate immune system response, or to even attract other cells to that area. And so histamines are a chemical signaling, chemical signaling molecule. But histamine has several functions, but it's mainly known for its role in causing allergic and anaphylactic type symptoms. Allergies are your body's reaction to a foreign protein. However, if you have an allergy to a particular protein, your immune system overreacts to its presence in your body. See, that's where I start to disagree with traditional healthcare, is that they always are saying that the body is messing up, that the body is messing up, that the body is making a mistake, that the immune system is making a mistake. And I always say, that's really interesting, because how could then someone be perfectly fine and have an autoimmune disease at 58 years of age? Did all of a sudden the immune system just turn on it? Or maybe it's just doing its job. Maybe there's a breakdown of a barrier, and now you are then being exposed to more proteins, and the immune system is just doing its job. Now, with histamines, a cascade of reactions leads to release of histamine. If the immune reaction is severe, it can cause anaphylaxis. So you've seen that with people with very severe food allergies, like to peanuts or to eggs. And we're talking about an anaphylactic response or an IgE type food allergy. But here's the thing, is that an anaphylactic type allergy, like an IgE allergy, it's not an all or nothing. There's different severities of it. And in fact, some people are walking around with an IgE food allergy that's very mild, and they're having mild symptoms and they don't even realize that they have it. Why? Because it's not life-threatening, but they just feel like garbage most of the time that they're eating that food, but they haven't made that connection, which affects most of your body. Anaphylactic shock is life-threatening. I agree. Now, your body mainly stores histamine where? In this immune cell known as mast cells, in tissues and basophils in the blood. So mast cells are usually hanging around at a barrier within the tissue. Basophils are located in the blood. Mast cells are a type of white blood cell that are present in connective tissues throughout your body, especially, now think of this, under your skin, which is a barrier, near blood vessels and lymph vessels, which is going to be close to a barrier as well, in nerves, and in your lungs and intestines, which is also another barrier. Okay, so it's sitting around the barrier because that's where you're going to get exposed to foreign proteins. Now, there's different types of histamine receptors. So the immune system releases histamine, the mast cells, but then they also have receptors in different types of tissues. You have your H1 receptors. So H1 receptors are located throughout the body, including neurons or brain cells, smooth muscle cells of your airways and your blood vessels. And then activation of these receptors will cause this: itchy skin, expanding of blood vessels, or vasodilation, which will actually cause a decrease in blood pressure, which leads to low blood pressure or hypertension, which can cause an increase in heart rate. Because you lower your blood pressure, your heart needs to beat faster in order to get the blood to the tissues. It can cause flushing, narrowing of your airways, known as bronchoconstriction, otherwise it can be known as asthma. It can cause an increase in pain. It can cause an increase in vascular permeability, like edema or swelling. It can cause nasal congestion, runny nose. And then outside of these reactions, they also help because they're not all bad. It helps to regulate. Now, think of this: your sleep and wake cycles, your food intake, your body temperature, your emotions, because of how it influences the brain, your memory, and yes, even your learning. That's why when we start helping with people with their immune system and food, one of the first things that they start to say is, wow, I feel so much more calm and relaxed and less bloated. And yeah, I'm even sleeping better as well. So you have these different receptor sites. You have your H1 receptors, you have your H2 receptors as well. Now, H2 receptors are located in a little bit different place. These are located in the cells in your stomach that release acid. These are known as your parietal cells, and the smooth muscle cells, and also your heart cells. When those are activated through a histamine response, it will cause stomach acid secretion. So normally what I say, guys, is I say, hey, you usually are suffering from a low stomach acid situation, which most people are. But in some cases, when people do have a high histamine response, it will immediately cause stomach acid secretion, even without the presence of food, which is why some people will get in without the presence of food, will get heartburn. They're like, I'm not even eating anything, yet I'm having some kind of weird response that's happening in the stomach. Now, this is not the body messing up, because the body never messes up. This is your body saying, hey, if I'm having a histamine response, then what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to increase stomach acid to kill off any foreign invader that may be coming in through my stomach. So it will cause stomach acid secretion, stimulation of mucus glands in your airway. That's why you start to get phlegmy, vascular permeability, hypotension, flushing, headache, rapid heartbeat, and also bronchoconstriction. So it constricts your bronchioles in your airways, which is why even when you have a histamine response, it can cause an asthma response. Do you guys see how all of this is tied together? So H3 receptors, now listen to this, mainly are involving your blood-brain barrier. They're found in neurons in your central nervous system. H3 receptors regulate the release of histamine and also neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine, which is very important when it comes to memory and learning. Okay. This is why they're even saying, hey, things like problems with memory, problems with like Alzheimer type symptoms, maybe this is involving the immune system. Maybe this is even involving a histamine response. And that's why researchers are studying H3 receptor antagonist medications for potential use in the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases. So you like how they always will try to find a medication to block the receptor of it, but they're not trying to find the reason why there may be a high histamine load that's taking place. And actually going back and looking at the nerves or looking at the immune system. And then you also have H4 receptors. These are present in your bone marrow and your hematopoietic cells. These are immature cells that can develop into all types of other white blood cells. So they do play a role in the formation of certain blood cells, and they also play an important role in actual inflammatory disorders and autoimmune diseases. So you have different receptors on different types of tissues that all have these histamine type receptors. So I want to ask this question, if you haven't already thought about this: is there a link between histamines and brain issues? Think of this. Is there a link between an immune response releasing histamines and brain issues like the inability to be able to concentrate, or to have a depressed mood, or anxiety, or the inability to be able to form new memories, or to have depression? Because, guys, all you have to do is do a search, go to PubMed and look at histamines and depression, and you will see a link between that as well. And in fact, this actually comes from PubMed. And this talks about histamine and histamine receptors' roles in major depressive disorder. See, here's what I find so interesting is that, yes, depression is real, but we are just saying it just has to do with some kind of weird chemical imbalance. We don't know why this is happening. Yes, there are mental issues that are at play. There are physical issues, and there's also chemical issues as well. But they're just saying the chemical issue is some kind of imbalance that you have no control over, but maybe the chemical response is a histamine. It's an immune system response. And this is why if people do have an overabundance of histamines, not that the body is messing up because there is a breakdown happening somewhere, is that it can play a role in major depressive disorder. So here's actually what they say. This comes from Frontiers in Psychiatry 2022. It's 1 year old. Although the incidence of major depressive disorder is high, because it is high and it's only getting worse, and its social impact is great, yes, because it is one of the leading causes of disability around the world. They say we still know very little about the pathophysiology of depression, meaning they know very little about why it happens. What's the pathology of why it happens? Which is why the experts are saying we know very little, but yet some of these doctors on social media speak with the utmost of confidence and authority, saying we know the reason why. Guys, this is why I find it so ridiculous that they're so confident that they know everything about the immune system, yet we find new things that are about the immune system all the time. We don't even know why certain antibodies are even existing within the body, but yet they say we know everything about everything and the science is settled. It's never, ever settled, or else if it was, it would never be science. So they don't understand the pathophysiology of it. Now think of this, the monoamine hypothesis of depression suggests that 5-HT, which is a precursor to serotonin production, norepinephrine, and dopamine synergistically affect mood, which is the basic of current drug therapy for depression. Now, I want you guys to understand is that it is still a hypothesis. The whole idea of being low in serotonin is not a scientific fact. It is still a hypothesis. They're giving people medication based off of a hypothesis. The brain neurotransmitter histamine is involved in major depressive disorder. They further go on to say, is notably in rodent studies, several different types of agonists, histamine agonists or antagonists, were found to be safe and effective in alleviating depression-like behavior. So what they're saying is just like I went over here in the last couple of slides, H1 and H3 receptor antagonists, which means they're blocking the histamine from reaching the receptor site, not trying to lower histamines, but actually just blocking the histamine from having the effect on the target tissue. As they're saying, wow, when we do that, we're actually seeing improvements in major depressive disorder. To highlight the complex functions of histamine and depression, and reveals that histamine receptors can be used, now listen to what they say, as new targets in antidepressant therapy. So again, not to just beat a dead horse, but they're talking about what new drugs can we come up with. So they find the mechanism, but rather than ask the question, why is there an overabundance of histamines taking place? They're saying, we're just going to block it. We're just going to, the fire alarm is going off, but don't worry, we'll go ahead and we'll put earmuffs on and we'll silence the alarm from going off. So this is the biggest things. My biggest complaint is that let's just forget about the cause, guys, and let's develop new drugs instead. And this is the biggest beef that I have when it comes to healthcare, is that it's not about finding causes, it's about finding new and novel drugs in order to create a new market. The biggest thing we have to ask is, why are there so many people who have so many histamines within the body? Why, first and foremost, is that happen? Let's back it up. Let's start talking about that. And let's not be talking about all the new and latest and greatest drugs that we can bring to market so that more and more people can take more and more medications and to be customers for the rest of their life. So let's talk about not just histamines, but let's talk about a quote unquote histamine intolerance. Okay. Now, histamine intolerance occurs when you have a high level of histamine in your body. It can happen if your body can't break down histamine properly. Okay. Now, there's two things at play here is that if your body does have a high amount of histamines, then maybe it's not messing up. Maybe there's a problem where those cells are living that's getting exposed to a lot of foreign invaders, which is just the immune system doing its job. But you can also have a problem with the inability to be able to break down and to clear histamines. So they never talk about the reason why there's a high amount of histamines, but they will talk about maybe you can't break down this chemical signaling molecule, which will then cause an increased reaction taking place. So anytime that you can cause an increase in histamines, because some people do have a problem breaking out, I'm going to go over that, breaking them down. I'm going to go over that in just a second. But I want you to think of some of the symptoms that can take place when you do have a histamine response: headaches or migraines. How many of you, if you've actually gotten your food allergy testing, we're not just talking about IgE, we're talking about IgG food allergies, and it causes you to have a headache, or it causes you to have nasal congestion, or it causes you to become tired, or it causes you to break out in hives, or it causes things like diarrhea or bloating. And here's what's interesting is that a histamine intolerance can also cause irregular periods. Isn't that interesting? They're even talking about, maybe inflammation and an inflammatory response can change your hormones. That's, guys, what we talk about. Because when we talk about, hey, balance my hormones, you cannot balance your hormones unless you are first and foremost finding the inflammatory triggers first and foremost. This is what is also sad when it comes to healthcare, that if a girl or a woman or a young woman comes in with some kind of menstrual disorder, the first thing that they do is let's throw more hormones in the form of birth control. Or this is even true when it comes to menopause. As they're saying, I feel awful after menopause, let's throw a bunch of hormones and block the reason why you are feeling so horrible. Just remember this, guys, no one's been able to answer this question, because if menopause was designed to make you feel horrible, in which your hormones return to levels prior to puberty, then why aren't girls that are prepubescent suffering the same things that you are as someone who is postmenopausal? The difference is that I guarantee you've had more time to have become much more inflamed and have a lot more immune system triggers. So how can you clear? Cleveland Clinic talks about how can you clear histamines from the body. This is where they go into the different types of medications. So number one, an H1 antihistamine. So what these do is they block receptors that have H1 receptors. So they're not actually not causing histamine to get released. They're just blocking the signal. So again, they're just putting earmuffs while the fire alarm is going off. Then you have H2 antihistamines. So these are for help to treat several digestive issues like peptic ulcer disease, gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, indigestion. And so basically what they're doing is that when you do have a high amount of histamines, you're going to have a high stomach acid release. And so they're just blocking that from happening. So they're blocking the stomach acid release. Then you also have things like corticosteroids. And basically what they do, this is certainly true when they're given corticosteroids for asthma, what they're doing is just lowering an overall immune system response. They're just knocking out certain parts of the immune system, which also leaves you very susceptible to other things like infection taking place. You also have epinephrine injections. That's when people have an EpiPen when they have severe food allergies. But here's what's interesting. They put this at the bottom. They say certain supplements can help you break down histamines like copper, vitamin C, vitamin B6 may also help to lower histamine levels. Isn't that interesting? Okay. So the biggest thing I want to tell you guys is that antihistamines don't decrease histamine release. It only blocks it at the receptor, which is no different than if you have a fire alarm that's going off and you just decide to put earmuffs on because you don't want to hear it. The alarm is still going off, but you're just blocking it. And that may be all good and dandy if that is a false alarm, or that may be good and dandy in the initial stages of the fire. But if you keep ignoring the fire alarm, then at some point, much more serious things are going to happen. Or it would be like looking at this fire alarm and just putting a pillow over that. So it's like, yeah, we can still hear the alarm, but it's just a lot more quieter and it's not as annoying. Listen to your body because your body is intelligent. It's telling you something is wrong and something is going on. Not just, hey, take an antihistamine and forget about it. This is actually coming from me, who suffered with asthma, who suffered with allergies from 4 years of age, was on multiple antihistamines, was on multiple inhalers, was told, I'm going to have this for the rest of my life. There's nothing I can do. It's genetic. And meanwhile, I threw all of that stuff away by the time I was 24 years of age, and I haven't touched it for 22 years. There is a reason why. So how do I lower histamine? I guarantee that's what you're thinking. How do I just lower histamine? What are some supplements that I'm going to take in order to lower histamine? But it goes much deeper than that. Okay. It goes much more deeper than that. So a lot of you are going to say, well, maybe I should be avoiding histamine releasing foods, or foods that inhibit the breakdown of histamine. And that is at such a surface level, because I want you to think of this. There are people who have no problems eating these foods. Are there foods that are going to be higher in histamine? Do we even tell people it would be a good idea to avoid these while you heal? The answer is yes. So what are some of the highest histamine rich food? Preserved meats, guys. Foods that are high. If you look at the chemical structure of histamine, it contains nitrogen. And think of foods that are high in nitrates and nitrites. So preserved meats, alcohol, even fermented foods can have it. Dried fruits, avocado, eggplant, spinach, shellfish, and even aged cheese. So you may notice that when you eat these foods, you do in fact have a reaction. So those are the foods that are rich in histamines, but then you have the histamine releasing foods that oftentimes are coming from the histamines released by the immune system. And guys, it's not necessarily these foods, it's that these foods are very common food allergies. So you have alcohol, banana, tomatoes, and even if you look at tomatoes, guys, tomatoes are toxic on the skin. The seeds are toxic, which is why if you want a much less toxic tomato, you need to actually peel it, de-seed it, and then boil it, which is what they do in Mediterranean countries, but we eat raw tomatoes all the time. Now, interesting enough, wheat, germ, beans, chocolate, citrus fruits, strawberries, pineapple, mushrooms, nuts, especially walnuts, cashews, and peanuts. But then here's what's interesting too is food additives, especially free glutamate or monosodium glutamate, food colorings, sulfites, and nitrates, or nitrites, I should say. So have you ever seen someone who is perfectly normal and then they get a food and they have a just complete 180 degrees in which they have a change in their emotion, a change in their skin, a change in their behavior, and nobody has any kind of like reasoning why? This is where the teacher calls up the parents and says, I think that Johnny has ADHD and you need to be putting him on a stimulant medication. And let's just go ahead and just knock out any kind of brain growth or any kind of organ growth, because it's going to suppress his appetite and it's just going to make him a zombie, but at least he'll be good in class. No one is even trying to figure out why this is happening. And many times it's what the parents are feeding them, which often many times is absolute garbage as well. And then there's foods that inhibit DAO, which is the enzyme that breaks down histamines located primarily within the gastrointestinal system. That can be alcohol, that can be fermented drinks like kombucha, that can be teas, and it also can be energy drinks. Why? Because it's so high in caffeine. So you can be eating foods that are high in histamines, foods that are having an immune system reaction that then cause the immune system to release histamine, or that are inhibiting the breakdown of histamine circulating, especially around the gastrointestinal system. So what do we know about diamine oxidase for histamine intolerance? This comes from WebMD. Now, if you ever know people who have mast cell activation syndrome, they typically are going to have all of these different symptoms that I just described about having high histamines or histamine intolerance. Yes, many times these people do have multiple food allergies. They have terrible barrier function, especially around the gastrointestinal system. But then also they may have a real big problem with the inability to be able to break down histamines. So diamine oxidase is an important digestive enzyme in your body. Some people who take diamine oxidase supplements to help with histamine intolerance, which this tolerance can cause things like migraines, headaches, gut issues, and skin conditions. But the biggest thing that I will tell you is this, is that if you want to increase DAO in your intestines, then have enough stomach acid, which is why sterilizing your food is so important with betaine hydrochloric acid, by then also taking enough liver. Why? Because liver contains things like copper. Liver will also contain things like vitamin B6, methylated B12, and also folate. All of those things are needed in order for the production of that enzyme, including vitamin C, which is also the best form of it, is going to be in the form of camu. So actually, rather than just taking a supplement to try to break it down, you need to make sure that you're meeting your nutritional goals as well, which is why increasing stomach acid, taking liver, eating liver, or taking it in capsule form, and then also taking high quality vitamin C will actually help with this enzyme to break down those histamines. But watch, it gets even deeper. I want you to think of this. In order for you to be able to make this enzyme, you need to methylate it. So you need to add a carbon and 3 hydrogens. If you are a poor methylator, here's the thing. If you are a poor methylator, who are poor methylators? People who either have single allele, double allele, MTHFR gene variations. Then if you're a poor methylator, you're going to have a hard time breaking down histamines, whether they're in the food or whether they're considered a food allergy. But you also are going to have other issues, like having a histamine intolerance is not just the only thing that you're going to have going on, because I guarantee you'll probably have low muscle tone, low strength, fatigue, depression. You will have hormone issues because you will not detox properly, won't methylate in order to clear some of these hormones out. And you probably will have chronic pain in the form of fibromyalgia. And this is why a lot of the people who are suffering with mast cell activation syndrome, or MCAS, have all of these other issues that are going on. They will have fatigue. They'll have depression. They won't detox. They'll have menstrual cycle issues. They'll have chronic pain. And in fact, a lot of them are on the autistic spectrum as well. So that's why, guys, you have to start going deeper and not just asking the question, what supplement do I need to take? You have to start going deeper. So the point of it is this: if you're only avoiding histamine-rich foods, you're still treating the symptom. So here are some of the causes as far as why people have such a high amount of histamines. It begins in the gut. Why? Because the gut is a major barrier in which you have the most likelihood of causing some damage to that barrier, because it's only one cell layer thick, and also it is constantly under assault from foreign invaders, which would be proteins like a bacteria, yes, a virus, but also food proteins as well. So what do you have to look at? You have to look at to see if you have sufficient stomach acid. You have to look and see if you do have food allergies, both IgG and IgE food allergies, both of them, because both of them cause a histamine response. Medications will also cause it. How about vaccinations as well? How about chronic infection and parasitic infection, and also having a yeast overgrowth taking place? How about estrogen dominance? I'll show you that in just a second. Or you may be a very poor methylator, and in which case you don't make enough of this digestive enzyme to be able to break down histamines to be able to eliminate them from the body. Okay. This comes from the National Institutes of Health, PubMed. This is in the publication Nutrients 2021 of April, 2 years old. They talk about histamine intolerance. Here's what they say. Histamine intolerance is assumed to be a deficiency of the gastrointestinal enzyme diamine oxidase, which it goes a lot deeper than that. And therefore the food component histamine not being degraded and or absorbed properly within the gastrointestinal tract. Involvement of the GI mucosa in various disorders and diseases, several with several with unknown origin, and the effects of some medication seem to reduce gastrointestinal DAO activity. So histamine intolerance causes variable, functional, non-specific, and non-allergic GI and extra intestinal complaints. What are they saying? Gosh, this is really vague. We really don't know how to figure it out. We can't necessarily see it on any testing that we have going on. Why? Because they're not looking at the right tests. But it's causing more than just a gastrointestinal issue. It can become systemic. And what they also say is this: a targeted dietary intervention consisting of a histamine-reduced diet and or supplementation with oral dial capsules is helpful to reduce histamine intolerance-related symptoms. What do you mean by some kind of dietary intervention? So they'll say eat a low histamine diet. You know what we're saying instead? Maybe you should actually get your food allergies tested by a reputable country or company. So they go over all the different disorders, irritable bowel syndrome like disorders. So irritable bowel syndrome, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth are commonly reported, including functional dyspepsia. However, 80% of IBS patients identified food, including histamine, to be triggers for their GI symptoms. You know what's so interesting is that if you go to the doctor and you say, I'm having some issues with food, there's certain foods that are causing issues. They're causing bloating. They're causing irritable bowel syndrome. The first thing they're going to do is, let's do an IgE food allergy test. They're going to come back and there's probably no IgE food allergies. And they say, well, I guess you just have irritable bowel syndrome, which is kind of like fibromyalgia. It's a garbage type of thing, meaning we don't know what's causing it, but irritable bowel syndrome sounds like the best diagnosis. But then you say, but doctor, when I have certain dairy or when I have eggs, it causes issues. And you know what they say? You have a food intolerance, I guess. Well, if it's still causing an immune reaction, is that truly an intolerance or is that an allergy? And is that allergy, you are not measuring the type of immune system response or the antibody that's involved, which is not IgE, it's IgG. So patients with histamine intolerance report abdominal pain, postprandial fullness to be prominent symptoms, and these are described in functional dyspepsia also as main symptoms. SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, occurs with an abnormal increase in the overall bacterial population of the small intestine. Bloating and abdominal pain are primary symptoms in SIBO, very much comparable to a histamine intolerant complaint. How about non-celiac gluten sensitivity? I have heard doctors say there's no reason why you should avoid gluten unless you have celiac disease and you're having a reaction to celiac disease. But then you say, I feel so much better being off of gluten. And then they say, well, maybe it was just an intolerance. Well, what on earth is an intolerance? Basically, it's code word for saying it really is an allergy. We just we don't have the testing for it, which should be an IgG food allergy. So here's what they say. Currently, approximately 20% of the population are avoiding gluten foods because of a self-diagnosed new clinical condition referred to as non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So people are saying, I feel better when I'm off of it. And then the doctors are poo-pooing them, denying their experience, saying, yeah, it doesn't really exist. So a newly created term, non-celiac wheat sensitivity, has been suggested as a more accurate definition. Moreover, widely used gluten-containing bakery goods and beers are prepared with what? Histamine-producing yeast. which is why when we test people, there's a lot of people who have an allergy to brewers and to baker's yeast. You know what else has yeast? Anything that says yeast extract or MSG is also will contain yeast. Additionally, foods like pasta, pizza, and bulgur are very commonly consumed with histamine-containing tomatoes and seasonings. This is why people don't feel very good when they eat pizza, including myself. So I want to look at this. This is an IgG food allergy test. Yes, we actually test both. Here's what's interesting when you look at this. So here's a person with terrible abdominal type complaints, and you can see the food proteins that they are having an inflammatory response to. And look at this. This is actually just what they said. Tomato, wheat, baker's yeast, and brewer's yeast. This is causing an immune system reaction. This is causing a histamine release. When you look at how do you know what truly the foods you are, you have to test it. You have to test it. This is a basic food allergy test. And the lab that we actually use is Immunolabs, and it's not one of these internet-based Facebook, get it off of that, and it confuses you. This is either a yes or no answer, and it also describes the severity of the immune system reaction by attaching a number to it as well. How about food intolerance or malabsorption? Food intolerance or malabsorption and people who experience GI reactions to food are reported in 20% of the population, particularly sugars like lactose and fructose, proteins like gluten, and biogenic amines, including histamine, are widely consumed and trigger GI reactions to food. In patients with histamine intolerance, a deranged gut flora or microbiome and a change in the intestinal bacterial composition was demonstrated. How do you figure that out? By looking at a stool test. How about medications causing a quote unquote histamine intolerance? Due to the increased release of histamine or an inhibition of the enzyme DAO, a variety of medications may also influence histamine intolerance related complaints or induce histamine intolerance. Several of these drugs, now listen to this, include acetylsalicylic acid and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So what are some things that destroy the gastrointestinal system? Your things like aspirin, Advil, Tylenol, Aleve. Those things can actually cause it. And these are available over the counter. However, they may cause GI side effects, including with prolonged and high dose use and increased risk for GI bleeding. So not only do you start to bleed as a result, but you can also develop histamine intolerance, which is why when we talk to people, this can cause a lot of gastrointestinal issues. Who says so? The research does. Disorders associated with mast cells. Endogenous histamine is stored mainly in mast cells and in basophils. So endogenous means within the body. Where are they stored? In these immune cells and mast cells, and also, like I said before, in basophils. The mast cells histamine release appears linked to GI involving diseases like celiac disease, eosinophilic gastroenteritis, and mast cell activation syndrome. Okay. You can test this on a stool test when people have eosinophilic gastroenteritis. It's a very, that's a whole mouthful of things to say, but you can also test this on a stool test as well. Celiac disease is a well-defined autoimmune disorder characterized by gastrointestinal mucosa reaction to ingested gluten proteins. Mast cells releasing histamine and other inflammatory mediators have been linked with celiac disease, showing that mast cells infiltrating the mucosa were associated with the severity of mucosal damage. So what's happening? Yes, with celiac disease, it's very pronounced, but what if you also had 28 other different food allergies that's causing mast cells to degranulate, causing a histamine response that is then damaging the gastrointestinal barrier, producing an inflammatory response? It was suggested that cytokines combined with proliferation of eosinophils and histamine-releasing mast cells are involved in several symptoms of eosinophilic disease. So the influence of histamine-reduced diet on gastrointestinal systems remains to be discovered. So they're still trying to figure that out. Mast cell activation disorders have a certain relation of GI and extraintestinal complaints with histamine intolerance. So if you have some kind of mast cell activation syndrome and you have not had any kind of food allergy testing or any kind of stool testing done, then your doctor is doing you an incredible disservice. Other than giving you things like Benadryl and antihistamines, let's go deeper and let's actually find the cause. Just like I was saying regarding this as well, can you see it on a stool test? Yes. So here's a person who's got intestinal barrier inflammation and also eosinophil protein X, which means that there is a different type of inflammation involving eosinophils that involves a histamine response. And you can measure that. And there it is right there. And that's on a stool test. Also, this can be present when you have an H. pylori infection as well. So this can be due to infection. Biggest reason why people get H. pylori is because they're chronically low in stomach acid, which then H. pylori is normal flora within the stomach and crawl back up into an environment where it doesn't belong and can start to eat away at the tissue and literally just it causes a blister on the stomach, which is going to hurt every single time you release stomach acid, because anytime you put something acid on a open wound or a blister, it's going to hurt. They also go in and talk about headache. So a pathophysiological mechanism of headache is still unknown when it comes to histamine intolerance, but also it can involve migraines, okay? Biogenic amines in wine, including histamine, tyramine, putrescine, have relevance for headache and histamine-related symptoms. So how many of you have actually, if you have consumed wine that has a high amount of brewer's yeast in it, that it immediately gives you a headache, or you'll also notice flushing of the skin. You may get tingling in the feet or tingling into the hands. That's a histamine response. Now, also that it can be causing a headache, but also bloating with headache was mentioned by 63% of histamine intolerance patients as one of the most common related symptom combinations, bloating and headache. Thus, the histamine content of consumed food may play a key role in triggering migraines and headaches. So do certain foods trigger a migraine for you? And if that is true, then it's probably causing a histamine release. It's probably causing an immune system reaction. Then they also talk about urticaria, which is a skin disease with unknown etiology. So if you are getting bumps on the skin and things like that. Now, if you talk about urticaria, which I do have a patient with that, and it's actually going away. So it's about 50% resolved. But the mainstay of medical therapy is symptom management. Okay, let's just control the symptoms. Let's give you some antihistamines. But they know that histamine releasing mast cells and basophils are known as primary inflammatory cells in urticaria. Degranulation, release of these vasoactive substances, including histamine and other pro-inflammatory mediators or just messengers coming from the immune system, will cause vasodilation, sensory nerve activation, dermal edema, or even wheals, if you've ever heard of wheals. It appears that some patients have dietary triggers contributing to this skin disease, and a number of food ingredients have been reported to worsen symptoms. So now we're even talking about the skin. Now, here's what's also interesting too, is that if people do have a high histamine load, they may also have a parasite. Mast cells and histamine alter intestinal permeability during a malaria parasite infection. So co-infections with malaria and non-typhoidal salmonella serotypes can present as life-threatening bacteremia, in contrast to self-resolving NTS diarrhea in healthy individuals. It was shown to increase gut mastocytosis, meaning if you have a parasite, it can cause things like leaky gut, increase gastrointestinal permeability, in which the mast cells are going to go in and try to do everything they can in order to get these proteins out that are leaking through the gastrointestinal barrier. So this is why even when someone has things like MCAS or high histamine load, that's why you also have to look for the presence of a parasite, whether it's in the gastrointestinal system. Very rarely are you going to see in the blood. You're not going to see malaria in people here from the United States. And then the last one I want to go over with you guys is estrogens. Remember I said estrogen dominance, okay? Now, this comes from just a couple of years ago, I think about 10 years ago, and it's called estrogens promote the degranulation of mast cells and basophils. Okay. Here's what they actually found. We found that exposure to physiological doses of estradiol, which is your main estrogen, and also a panel of environmental estrogens induce the release of preformed granular proteins, including leukotriene and all these chemical releases. But basically, what they are talking about is that estrogens can cause an increase in histamine release. They also found that when you took the ovaries out, it decreased the number of mast cells and also histamine concentrations. So the thing is this is also true because when you look at autoimmunity, who suffers with autoimmunity more, men or women? And again, when you are talking about autoimmunity and it's involving the immune system, so can the very fact if a woman has higher estradiol levels, can this play a role in the immune system responses? Yes, which is why it's very important to make sure that you have healthy estrogen metabolism at the liver and that you're not taking any extra estradiol, that you need a right amount in order to be able to have your menstrual cycle, to be able to get pregnant, to be able to have kids. But also you should have an on and off switch when it comes to this, because even I wonder about the number of women who have the inability to be able to clear their estrogens, whether that's happening in the liver, whether that's happening within the gastrointestinal system, because of just certain enzymes that will cleave off some of their detox products and reintroduce them back into the body. And so this also estrogen dominance can play a role when it comes to having some kind of histamine intolerance and some kind of immune system reaction. This is why we always ask the question, can HRT induce this? Can the inability to clear the estrogens, can this play a role in the immune system? And I believe very strongly that yes, it can, but doctors don't look at this because if someone is a endocrinologist or an OBGYN, they don't look at the immune system. They look at your hormones and that's it. If you want to talk to someone about your immune system, then go talk to an allergist. And this is why, guys, we have so many people who are specializing in so many different things that no one is able to connect the dots, which is why we keep going from specialist to specialist to specialist, and no one gets any better because no one is figuring it out. So let's talk about testing. Okay, so here's some of the testing that can actually leave clues. You can do a CBC, a complete blood count with the differential. Look at what there could be some elevations in certain types of white blood cells, including things like eosinophils and also in basophils. Also, a great test to get is an IgG and IgE food allergy test. Also doing a 3-day comprehensive stool. We do it for 3 days so that we need to rule out a parasite. So that's why we do it for a longer period of time. Heck, even mold mycotoxins can also cause some of these histamine type reactions. I just had a patient who had basically breaking out in hives, breaking out in eczema. First thing that I asked her is, and say, okay, let's do a food allergy test. Let's do a stool test. And then I looked at it and I said, are you in a house with water damage mold? And she said, yeah. Does that matter? And in fact, once we got her out of the water damage mold environment, the hives actually went away within about 10 days to 2 weeks. Also, you can look at a neurotransmitter test because do histamines affect your neurotransmitters? Yes, when we do a neurotransmitter test, we can look at the abundance of histamines. We can look at the abundance of histidine. We can look at serotonin. We can look at dopamine. We can look at all of those different things. In fact, even some of the calming neurotransmitters or inhibitory neurotransmitters. And in fact, you can't measure it in the blood, but you can measure it in the periphery by measuring it through the urine. And then for a lot of people who are just not only having a high amount of histamines from the immune system, but have the inability to break it down, you can actually do a methylation test, and you can even do genetic testing to look and see if you have things like MTHFR or you have COMT, like mutations that are going on, or we call them single nucleotide polymorphosis, or SNPs. And you can see that it's not a death sentence, but you may have a harder time, and you need to pay more attention to your nutrition in order to get more methyl donors and things like that. So guys, you don't have to get all of these tests, but I will tell you this: who has the ability to be able to decipher the things that are going on and to be able to get the right tests for you and to guide you through this process so that you can get your health back? It's a Wellness Way doctor. There is no doctor who trains harder. There's no doctor who researches more. There's no doctor who looks at things from a different perspective. And in fact, we pride ourselves in not being the specialist, because you know what a specialist is? Someone who knows more and more about less and less until finally they're experts in nothing. And this is why when you have 10 specialists, no one's figuring out the big picture and understanding that the body works like a Swiss watch. And that's why I tell people, please work with the Wellness Way doctor. Please don't ask how you can get these tests. Please don't ask your doctor, how can I ask my doctor for these tests? Because number one, they probably won't even order it. But number two, if they do, what are you going to do with it? And that's why I say, if you want to work with us, reach out. Go to thewellnessway.com or reach out to me. I'll try to find you someone who may be local, or we can also work remotely as well. And so that's why we say, hey, if you're watching this, please share this video, but also share this so that if someone is suffering and they're in the Chicagoland area, please get them to our next inflammation talk. And that will help set the stage for where we need to head as far as helping them to get their life back. And if they're also watching and they're from, the contiguous 48 states, then make sure that they go to the top and find that link tree. And that link tree, they'll find how to get registered for that webinar, and they'll be able to watch it and be able to schedule a discovery call with me at the end if they watch that all the way to the end. And then finally, guys, do me a favor and also share this video. But also, if you're from the Chicagoland area, please go and get your tickets, because again, I don't know if these have been all snatched up by now, because I just released it about an hour and a half ago. But if you're from the Chicagoland area, get your free tickets to see if we still have 20 left. Promo code LUCKYU at checkout. I can't wait to see you guys at the I Disagree tour. That's going to be a week from tomorrow, October 24th from 6 to 9. It's going to be an awesome event. I will be there. Dr. Patrick will be there. Dr. Veronica will be there from the Wellness Way Aurora, and we will have well over 150 people at that event who also want to think differently, because you cannot solve the problems today with the same level of thinking that created the problems in the first place. But in healthcare today, what we're doing is we're creating the problem, and then we're also, the solution does nothing to fix the problem, but offers a Band-Aid and a next level Band-Aid in order to try to fix it or cover up the effects of what they're doing. It's always why you have to get to the cause, because the cause is always the cure, because the body is smart, the body is intelligent. And if you never ever try to get to the cure, it will always find a workaround. And you can't always, for a long period of time, be trying to trick the body. Get to the reason why, so that the body can start to heal, that the body can start to adapt, and the body can finally start to get well again. Histamines, is it the missing link? I think so. I hope you look at it the same way as I do as well. So if you need help, make sure that you reach out. Please share this video. Guys, I hope you have an awesome rest of your evening. Be well, be blessed, and remember who you are.